I am seeking insights and guidance from other fathers who have navigated the painful experience of infidelity within their marriages. Recently, I uncovered the heart-wrenching truth that my wife, whom I will refer to as Deidre, has been unfaithful. This revelation has profoundly affected the dynamics of my family and my emotional well-being. At 31 years old, I am grappling with feelings of betrayal and loss, while Deidre, at 27, and I try to process the implications of her actions on our lives and our children. We are parents to a 4-year-old daughter, Sammy, and a 2-year-old son, Timmy, who are innocent parties in this turbulent situation and deserve stability and love. The infidelity occurred within the last few weeks, a time during which I had genuinely believed that Deidre was faithful. In fact, I was certain of her loyalty and commitment to our marriage. We celebrated nearly 6 years of marriage, with our anniversary approaching next Saturday, June 26th. The painful reality I face is that unless a miraculous turn of events occurs, this upcoming milestone may be one of the last we will share together as a couple. The thought of this impending separation weighs heavily on my heart, and I cannot ignore the profound sadness it brings. Our journey began when we first met during Deidre's final semester in college. Just 13 months later, we were married and started our life together. Deidre bravely relocated to the East Coast with me, where I had been working for 4 years. It was during this time that our children were born, and we began to build a life filled with dreams and aspirations. Earlier this year, I earned a promotion that allowed me to manage one of our company's offices, conveniently located just 15 minutes away from where we both grew up. This job opportunity was exciting for both Deidre and me, especially with the prospect of returning to our roots and providing our children the chance to grow up surrounded by family. Our families were overjoyed by our return, especially since both of our parents were eager to spend quality time with their grandchildren. My parents, along with Deidre's mother, who still resides in the area, expressed their excitement at the developments. Unfortunately, Deidre's father had passed away before I met her, a loss that undoubtedly affected her deeply. Nevertheless, our families were thrilled about the prospect of having us nearby, fostering a close-knit environment for our children. In a harmonious turn of events, my parents had recently moved into a new home within a 55-plus community, planning to rent out our family home for additional income. This historic family home, which sits on over 3 acres of picturesque land with a small creek winding through the wooded area at the back, holds immense sentimental value. Instead of purchasing a new house, Deidre and I made the decision to move into this cherished family property and pay rent to my parents. Their desire was to preserve this historical gem within the family for generations, a sentiment that resonated deeply with me. Although my parents and younger brother were not particularly keen on receiving rent, I insisted on it. My father's recent retirement meant he was counting on that income, and I wanted to support him while ensuring the home remained in the family. Essentially, paying rent felt like an investment in our future, as my parents planned to pass the property down to my brother and me. This household is a treasure trove of memories and emotions, a haven my family has taken great care of over the years. However, upon moving in, we discovered that there were a few repairs needed due to the home's historical nature and age. The unique fixtures and features that define its charm also require specialized care. My parents had worked with a local contracting company for over 35 years, a business known for its expertise in restoration and repairs on older homes. After compiling a comprehensive list of necessary projects, I reached out to this company and obtained a detailed cost estimate. The owner of the business visited our home to assess the situation firsthand and discuss the scope of work required. The positive online reviews speak to the quality of service provided by this contracting company, with an impressive 82% of their reviews rated 5 stars and 16% 4 stars, from almost 700 total reviews. In an industry often filled with average ratings, this level of satisfaction speaks volumes about their professionalism and workmanship. A couple of weeks after the estimate, the company began the repair work. They demonstrated a high level of efficiency, ensuring that the work site was tidy and organized at the end of each day, which reflected their commitment to quality. Deidre and I were genuinely satisfied with their work and the manner in which they conducted themselves throughout the projects. A team of 3 skilled craftsmen undertook the majority of the repairs, with one craftsman, whom I will refer to as Brock for the purposes of this narrative, handling most of the essential tasks. The level of expertise exhibited by these professionals not only restored our home but also provided a much-needed distraction during a turbulent time in our lives, underscoring the complexities of maintaining a family while dealing with personal heartbreak. Brock was an approachable and polite individual who was coincidentally around the same age as me. My daughter, in her endearing way, had affectionately labeled him as the window man. This nickname arose from her habit of spotting him while he was diligently working on a ladder outside our second-story windows, attending to various repairs around the house. All the necessary repairs were completed promptly, and we found ourselves comfortably settled into our new home. My wife and children were overjoyed with the space we had created, and I was satisfied with my new job. Everything seemed to be running smoothly and without any complications, until a seemingly innocent conversation with my daughter took a surprising turn exactly 2 weeks ago. On that day, my wife had gone shopping alongside her mother, leaving me responsible for the children. We were enjoying the outdoors, with my daughter energetically darting around, playing and exploring the yard. Eventually, fatigue caught up to her, and she hopped onto my lap for a moment of rest. As we engaged in light-hearted conversation, she suddenly looked up at me with a serious expression and said, "I saw Mommy napping with the window man." Before exploring this statement further, it is important to note that my daughter possesses extraordinary talents. I hold the typical parental bias that every parent has towards their child, but in her case, her gifts are not merely subjective, they are evident to everyone who encounters her, including her medical professionals. We had even subjected her to some testing prior to our move, and she had achieved one of the highest scores on record for a child her age at the clinic. Therefore, when she conveyed her surprising observation, I felt compelled to consider it seriously. Although there was a slight possibility that her vivid imagination had concocted a fib, my inclination was to believe her. I was taken aback by what I had just heard and asked her to repeat her statement, hoping to clarify any misunderstanding. She reiterated her words confidently. I found myself probing for additional details, asking her to elaborate on what she had seen. According to her account, my wife had just put Timmy and her down for their afternoon nap. During this time, Timmy had dropped his pacifier behind his bed and was crying for assistance to retrieve it. My daughter attempted to help but found she couldn't quite reach it, which prompted her to search for our mother. When I asked if she had called out for Mommy, she said she hadn't. Instead, she explained that she simply walked over to our bedroom door, opened it, and called for her mother. Curious about what she observed next, I pressed her for more. She described how Mommy had quickly gotten out of bed, wrapping herself in a blanket before greeting Sammy with a kiss. She then took my daughter by the hand to help retrieve Timmy's pacifier and tuck them back in for their nap. I continued to inquire about where she had seen the window man, and she responded that he was lying on my side of the bed. Hearing this was an emotional blow, but I managed to conceal my feelings and merely affirmed her statement with a quiet, "He was?" She confirmed with a nod. Intrigued, I continued to seek more details. Sammy recounted that after Mommy left their bedroom, she could hear her speaking with the window man before they both went outside. My curiosity intensified, and I wanted to understand her actions following that moment. Sammy explained that she had climbed out of bed, peeked out of the window, and saw him driving his truck down the driveway. I felt a mix of emotions, leaning toward gratitude for her openness. I leaned in and planted a heartfelt kiss on her forehead, thanking her for sharing this with me. However, what she shared next hit me like a ton of bricks. She revealed that Mommy had whispered to her, instructing her to keep it a secret. Naturally, I inquired about how she had reacted to this request, to which Sam replied, "I told Mommy okay." Despite her young age, it seemed my perceptive daughter understood that what she had witnessed was somehow inappropriate. To shield her from any distress, I chose to downplay the situation, reassuring her, "Thank you so much for telling me. I'm so proud of you. Now this can be our secret, okay?" She agreed, saying, "Okay, I won't tell Mommy I told you." Then, in a hushed tone, she added, "Daddy, don't tell Mommy I told you." I assured her, "There's no way I'd do that, this is our secret." To lighten the heavy atmosphere, I playfully tickled her, and soon we were both laughing and redirected our conversation to something else. It became evident that the secret my wife had asked her to keep was weighing heavily on our daughter. In sharing this information with me, it seemed to provide her with a much-needed sense of relief, even amidst the troubling implications of the revelation. Later that day, my wife returned home, accompanied by our mothers. As they entered the house, she gestured for me to come inside while our mothers made their way to the back porch to keep an eye on Sammy and Timmy. Once we were alone in the living room, my wife presented me with a gift she had recently purchased for Sammy. To my surprise, it was a birthday present that Sammy had chosen herself, even though her birthday was not until October. Curiously, I inquired about the timing of the gift, wanting to understand why it was being given now rather than closer to her actual birthday. My wife explained her reasoning. She felt compelled to give it to Sammy at this moment because she wanted to celebrate her daughter's goodness and behavior. This gesture caught me off guard, as Sammy had not expressed any desire for this gift nor had she shown anticipation for it until her birthday. Furthermore, my wife and I had established a clear agreement with Sammy that significant gifts would only be given on her birthday and during the Christmas season, a guideline that Sammy had accepted without question. It was worth noting that since selecting the gift a couple of months ago, she had not mentioned it again. My wife defended her decision by stating that Sammy had been such a wonderful child lately that she felt it was only right to reward her for her good behavior. She looked to me for reassurance and hoped that I wouldn't be upset by this unexpected deviation from our agreement. I assured her that I was not angry. However, I could not shake the feeling that this might be an attempt to bribe Sammy into keeping my wife's secret. When my wife finally presented the gift to Sammy, I was taken aback by Sammy's immediate reaction. She expressed her concern, saying, "I wasn't supposed to get this until my birthday. What am I going to receive then?" In response, my wife told her that because she had been such a good girl, both mommy and daddy wanted to give it to her now. To everyone's surprise, Sammy countered with, "No, I want to keep it until my birthday. I don't want it now." My wife continued to coax her to open the gift, trying to persuade Sammy that it was a special surprise, but Sammy remained steadfast in her decision and looked to me for support in maintaining her stance. I intervened, suggesting we take the gift upstairs and store it in her closet until her birthday arrived. My wife seemed taken aback by Sammy's response, but my understanding of her character allowed me to anticipate this. Sammy is exceptionally intelligent, and it was clear she genuinely preferred to wait until her birthday to open the gift. We took the gift upstairs, and a look of relief washed over Sammy when she realized she wouldn't have to open it immediately. After returning downstairs with Sammy, we were greeted by my dad and brother, who had just arrived. We spent the rest of the day enjoying quality family time, sharing a meal, and engaging in light-hearted conversation. Though I engaged with my family, my mind remained preoccupied with the revelation Sammy had shared earlier. Later that night, I intended to confront my wife about the situation, but I ultimately decided against it. I reasoned that if Sammy's words held any truth, my wife would likely deny them. Instead, I casually informed her that I needed to wake up early on Sunday morning to work on some tasks for my company using our home computer. She agreed, even offering to keep me company during this time, but I declined her offer, preferring to work alone. When Sunday morning arrived, I meticulously checked our home computer for any signs of suspicious activity but found nothing out of the ordinary. Next, I accessed my wife's phone using her password, but again, I discovered nothing that raised any alarms. A part of me began to wonder whether Sammy had fabricated the entire story, but the details she provided were too vivid to dismiss outright. The rest of the day was spent at my parents' house, where we visited with my aunt and uncle, who had come to town after being away for over 2 years. It was a joyous reunion, especially for them to finally meet Timmy, who they had not seen before. The day unfolded pleasantly, and my wife displayed her usual warmth and affection, showing no signs of any underlying issues. However, as I returned to work on Monday, I found it increasingly difficult to shake the thought of what Sammy had disclosed to me. Throughout the day, I drove by our home multiple times in an attempt to ease my growing suspicions. This pattern continued into Tuesday and Wednesday, yet I still found nothing concrete to support my concerns. Despite the lack of evidence, a strong intuition persisted that Sammy might indeed be telling the truth. In light of this realization, I toyed with the idea of hiring a private investigator but ultimately decided it would be more prudent to invest in a security camera system. I visited Best Buy, purchased the cameras, and set them up while my wife and Sammy were attending an evening event at our local nature center. With Timmy under my watch, I carefully positioned one camera outside near the garage, overlooking the driveway, while another camera was set up in our living room, and the third found its place in our master bedroom. Each camera was discreetly placed, intentionally positioned to remain unnoticed unless someone was looking for them. The presence of the cameras in our home was discreet, designed to blend into the surroundings, but they were easily noticeable to anyone who might have been actively searching for them. My primary concern revolved around the camera positioned in our bedroom. Even though it was mounted on the crown molding and matched the decor with its white and black trim, it remained a possibility that someone lying down and looking up could spot it. To maintain a sense of privacy and security, I established a routine. I would activate the surveillance system before departing for work each day and deactivate it upon returning home. Typically, my wife and children spent minimal time during the day in the living room, bedroom, or driveway, which meant that the cameras did not often trigger an alert. However, when any motion was detected, I promptly received a text alert. Everything seemed to be normal until one Tuesday afternoon at precisely 1:46 p.m. when my phone buzzed with a notification from the driveway camera. Intrigued, I checked the live feed and saw a truck from a contracting company moving toward our driveway. Almost immediately, another alert flashed across my screen, this time from the living room camera. The footage showed my wife in a compromising position, kissing Brock, confirming my worst fears that had been shared by Sammy. The devastating reality hit me hard. With an overwhelming sense of urgency, I made my way back home. Simultaneously, I dialed my mother to inform her of the unfolding situation and asked her to come to my house as quickly as possible. I requested that she bring along my brother, aunt, and uncle for support. During our phone conversation, I updated them on the distressing circumstances. By this point, I had also received a notification from the bedroom camera, which provided me with a clearer picture of what was taking place within those walls. Although I was grappling with intense emotions, I maintained my composure and began to relay instructions to my family. I specifically directed my mother and aunt to take the children outside to ensure their safety while I confronted my wife. Additionally, I requested that my uncle and brother accompany me into the bedroom during this intense confrontation, as I felt it was crucial to have witnesses and prevent any escalation into violence. They readily agreed to my request. Upon our arrival, we parked the car in the driveway, ensuring that Brock's truck was effectively blocked from leaving, and then approached the front door as a united group. Fortunately, the door was unlocked, allowing us to enter without any complications. The layout of our home positioned the bedroom at the back, which meant that neither my wife nor Brock would see or hear us as we approached. I took the lead, with my brother and uncle following closely, and my mother and aunt trailing behind. Sounds emanating from the bedroom masked any noise our group might have made while ascending the stairs and walking down the hallway leading to the bedroom. My heart raced in my chest as I signaled for my mother and aunt to continue past us to the children's room. Turning to my uncle and brother, I quietly asked if they were prepared for what was about to unfold. Their affirmative nods confirmed their readiness. With a deep breath, I opened the bedroom door and stepped inside. My wife immediately let out a sharp scream, exclaiming, "Oh no! Oh my God!" Brock, caught off guard, hastily dismounted from the bed, tumbling backward onto the floor and starting to apologize profusely while struggling to gather his clothes. I held my phone aloft, recording the scene silently, panning the camera between the two as Brock kept repeating his apologies. Meanwhile, my wife pulled the sheets up to her face, tears streaming down as she sobbed, insisting that this was not supposed to happen. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Dave. I love you so much. I'm so sorry," she cried, her words heavy with emotion. After a few excruciating minutes, Brock managed to fully dress himself and sat on the floor, covering his face with his hands, still mumbling apologies. My wife remained in bed, crying and pleading for me not to make her leave. Ignoring her distress, I instructed Brock that he needed to leave immediately, and to my surprise, he complied without argument. Before he exited the room, I warned him, "Don't even think about taking your truck. It's blocked, and I will be calling the company to pick it up." Next, I picked up my phone and called my mother-in-law, explaining the heartbreaking situation to her and asking her to come and pick up her daughter. My wife continued to hide beneath the covers, begging me not to force her to leave, but I paid her please little attention. Shortly after that, my mother-in-law arrived. As she entered, I stepped out of the bedroom with my uncle and brother. I could hear her voice rising above my wife's sobs, creating a chaotic atmosphere that enveloped the house. To my astonishment, my wife left the house in a hurried state, her head bowed low as tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't utter a single word during her departure, which left me reeling at the sight of her in what appeared to be a profound state of shock and deep embarrassment. My meal had certainly acted in a way that was considerate and understanding, offering me a heartfelt hug and a gentle kiss before expressing her unwavering love for me. After the tumultuous events unfolded, and once they had left, I sought solace in the backyard, spending time with my children, attempting to distract my mind from the chaos. With my thoughts scattered, I ultimately decided to reach out to the contracting company responsible for the incident. After briefly explaining the purpose of my call, I was connected directly to the cell phone of the owner of the company. He conveyed his sincere apologies for the situation, assuring me that his team would do everything possible to rectify the circumstances and make amends. I expressed my gratitude for his understanding and concluded the call, feeling a small sense of relief amid the turmoil that had enveloped my life. Approximately 1 hour later, the company arrived with a representative to retrieve the truck that had caused so much distress. Curiously, Brock, the individual responsible, was nowhere in sight. The following Monday, I took a day off from work to meet with a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings. I also secured the services of another attorney from the same firm, specifically to address the situation with the contracting company. While I have a certain level of respect for the business owner and his operation, I firmly believe that my family deserves some level of compensation for the emotional harm inflicted by their employees' actions. Since the day everything came to light, I have not exchanged a single word with my wife. She has inundated my phone with calls and text messages. Apologies and pleas for forgiveness have become a regular occurrence, with her seeking a second chance. However, I am resolute in my decision to not entertain such notions, at least not at this current juncture. In defiance of my attorney's advice, I organized for my wife's belongings to be relocated with my brother and a friend, who helped transport them to her mother's home. Now, I have established a regimented routine. Each morning, my wife and her mother arrive at my house at 6:30 a.m. My mother-in-law enters the house while my wife remains seated in the car, waiting until I leave for work. Following my workday, I head out for dinner at a restaurant, routinely returning home around 6:30 p.m. By that time, my wife and her mother have already had dinner with the kids. When I am roughly 5 minutes from home, I call my mother-in-law to let her know, which signals my wife to make her way to the car while her mother stays inside with the children. Upon my arrival, I intentionally avoid any interaction with my wife, who is left waiting in the car, as I walk straight into the house. Typically, I engage in a brief conversation with my mother-in-law to recap the day before she departs and then spend the remaining hours of the evening with my children. This routine has now become my daily norm, repeating every day of the week. While I recognize that this pattern may come across as excessive to some, I have a profound desire to maintain a clear boundary with my wife. The idea of preventing her from seeing our children altogether weighs heavily on my mind, even as I acknowledge the impracticality of such a wish. The anger I harbor over the betrayal runs deep. The realization that she allowed a stranger into our bed while our children slept in the adjacent room, and that she encouraged our daughter to lie to protect her actions, constitutes a transgression I cannot forgive. This sense of betrayal has driven me to instruct my lawyer to pursue full custody of our children. While my attorney suggests that the likelihood of achieving full custody may be slim, there is still a chance we could secure joint 50-50 custody with my home being designated as the primary residence for the children. As I navigate this tumultuous period in my life, I am left pondering the question of whether anyone has successfully raised children after a divorce without ever speaking another word to their ex-wife. My attorney plans to propose that all future communication between my wife and me occurs solely through a court-approved email application, allowing for verbal communication only in emergency situations involving our children. Given the situation, I hold a deep-seated resentment toward my wife and exhibit an absence of concern for her well-being post-divorce. Although she is the mother of my children, my feelings remain indifferent. My family has urged me to release the hatred and anger I possess towards my soon-to-be ex-wife, expressing concern about the negative impact it could have on both my well-being and that of my children. Nevertheless, I find it incredibly challenging to let go. I understand that my family has my best interests at heart, yet I feel that unless someone has walked in my shoes, they can't truly grasp the depth of my experience. I am eager to hear the responses of others who may find themselves in a similar predicament, and I intend to reply to as many as I can. My responses may be delayed, but I wanted to reach out and provide an essential update to everyone. I appreciate the numerous inquiries about my situation, and it is important for me to give you an overview of my current status. First and foremost, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude for the messages I've received. The support and constructive feedback have proven invaluable as I navigate the tumultuous waters of divorce. Mentally, I find myself in a far better place than I was back in June. This positive shift in my mindset can be attributed to my incredible children and the unwavering support of my family, especially my parents and my brother. In terms of my children's well-being, they are coping remarkably well given the circumstances. Timmy, being too young, does not fully comprehend the changes taking place in our family dynamics. Sammy, on the other hand, hasn't noticed any significant difference in her day-to-day life, as she continues to see her mother regularly at our home from 6:30 a.m. until 6:30 p.m. To maintain stability and comfort for them, I have been having dinner at my parents' home, and afterward, the three of us return to my house to relieve my mother-in-law and my wife of their responsibilities. This arrangement has been beneficial for the children, as they enjoy the company and support throughout the day. On the other hand, my soon-to-be ex-wife is facing her own struggles. She still seems to believe that there is a possibility of rekindling our relationship and has been making various suggestions in an attempt to win me back. Most recently, she proposed the idea of establishing a one-sided open relationship in which I would be free to have as many partners as I desire, while she would remain faithful. Alongside this, she even suggested signing a post-nuptial agreement under these conditions. This proposition does not align with my values. I am a man who deeply respects the concept of monogamy, which is what I will seek in my future relationships, although I do not anticipate embarking on anything new in the near future. Currently, she is attending therapy 3 times a week and has convinced her mother that she experienced a brief period of insanity that led to her infidelity. This explanation seems far-fetched to me, as I firmly believe she was fully aware of her actions. I have come to understand that some individuals resort to claiming temporary insanity as a way to rationalize their infidelity, but I refuse to accept this narrative. Despite the emotional implications, I have not spoken a word to her since the separation began. My mother-in-law, a compassionate woman who holds deep affection for me, my children, and my parents, has taken this situation quite hard. She has approached me several times, expressing her desire for reconciliation and forgiveness between her daughter and me, emphasizing her love for both me and her grandchildren. I hold my mother-in-law in high regard, but I have chosen not to engage in an in-depth conversation about forgiveness. I have made it clear that, for me, both forgiveness and reconciliation are not on the table. Regarding my wife's feelings of remorse, I do believe she experiences some level of regret, but it seems to stem more from self-pity and a sense of loss regarding the consequences of her actions rather than genuine remorse for the pain caused. She may have had the misguided notion that her affair with Brock could be acceptable as long as it didn't visibly disrupt our relationship. In an audacious move, she even sent me an email claiming that she had given me 100% of herself during the affair, including her body. This message struck me as irritating and further highlighted the dissonance in her understanding of fidelity. That is enough about her for now. Focusing on these issues only serves to frustrate me. As the divorce is expected to be finalized in a couple of months, I will return with updates for everyone concerned about my situation. As a follow-up to the many requests for updates, I am now pleased to share that I have officially finalized my divorce from Deidre. However, the process turned out to be significantly more demanding than I had envisioned, filled with emotional drama and turmoil that delayed the finalization until March of this year. Throughout this ordeal, I remained steadfastly focused on expediting the process, while Deidre exhibited increasingly desperate behaviors. She attempted to engage with me daily, but I maintained firm boundaries, insisting that our communications be limited strictly to discussions about our children. Whenever she attempted to discuss our past relationship, I reaffirmed that our marriage was over and that we would be transitioning into a co-parenting relationship moving forward. In September, I received a troubling report from my mother-in-law, who informed me that Deidre had been expressing thoughts about ending her life. She allegedly stated that if she couldn't have me, she didn't want to live. My mother-in-law pleaded with me to consider speaking with Deidre, and although I initially hesitated, I ultimately agreed to meet with her. My responses may be delayed, but I wanted to reach out and provide an essential update to everyone. I appreciate the numerous inquiries about my situation, and it is important for me to give you an overview of my current status. First and foremost, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude for the messages I've received. The support and constructive feedback have proven invaluable as I navigate the tumultuous waters of divorce. Mentally, I find myself in a far better place than I was back in June. This positive shift in my mindset can be attributed to my incredible children and the unwavering support of my family, especially my parents and my brother. In terms of my children's well-being, they are coping remarkably well given the circumstances. Timmy, being too young, does not fully comprehend the changes taking place in our family dynamics. Sammy, on the other hand, hasn't noticed any significant difference in her day-to-day life, as she continues to see her mother regularly at our home from 6:30 a.m. until 6:30 p.m. To maintain stability and comfort for them, I have been having dinner at my parents' home, and afterward, the 3 of us return to my house to relieve my mother-in-law and my wife of their responsibilities. This arrangement has been beneficial for the children, as they enjoy the company and support throughout the day. On the other hand, my soon-to-be ex-wife is facing her own struggles. She still seems to believe that there is a possibility of rekindling our relationship and has been making various suggestions in an attempt to win me back. Most recently, she proposed the idea of establishing a one-sided open relationship in which I would be free to have as many partners as I desire, while she would remain faithful. Alongside this, she even suggested signing a post-nuptial agreement under these conditions. This proposition does not align with my values. I am a man who deeply respects the concept of monogamy, which is what I will seek in my future relationships, although I do not anticipate embarking on anything new in the near future. Currently, she is attending therapy 3 times a week and has convinced her mother that she experienced a brief period of insanity that led to her infidelity. This explanation seems far-fetched to me, as I firmly believe she was fully aware of her actions. I have come to understand that some individuals resort to claiming temporary insanity as a way to rationalize their infidelity, but I refuse to accept this narrative. Despite the emotional implications, I have not spoken a word to her since the separation began. My mother-in-law, a compassionate woman who holds deep affection for me, my children, and my parents, has taken this situation quite hard. She has approached me several times, expressing her desire for reconciliation and forgiveness between her daughter and me, emphasizing her love for both me and her grandchildren. I hold my mother-in-law in high regard, but I have chosen not to engage in an in-depth conversation about forgiveness. I have made it clear that, for me, both forgiveness and reconciliation are not on the table. Regarding my wife's feelings of remorse, I do believe she experiences some level of regret, but it seems to stem more from self-pity and a sense of loss regarding the consequences of her actions rather than genuine remorse for the pain caused. She may have had the misguided notion that her affair with Brock could be acceptable as long as it didn't visibly disrupt our relationship. In an audacious move, she even sent me an email claiming that she had given me 100% of herself during the affair, including her body. This message struck me as irritating and further highlighted the dissonance in her understanding of fidelity. That is enough about her for now. Focusing on these issues only serves to frustrate me. As the divorce is expected to be finalized in a couple of months, I will return with updates for everyone concerned about my situation. As a follow-up to the many requests for updates, I am now pleased to share that I have officially finalized my divorce from Deidre. However, the process turned out to be significantly more demanding than I had envisioned, filled with emotional drama and turmoil that delayed the finalization until March of this year. Throughout this ordeal, I remained steadfastly focused on expediting the process, while Deidre exhibited increasingly desperate behaviors. She attempted to engage with me daily, but I maintained firm boundaries, insisting that our communications be limited strictly to discussions about our children. Whenever she attempted to discuss our past relationship, I reaffirmed that our marriage was over and that we would be transitioning into a co-parenting relationship moving forward. In September, I received a troubling report from my mother-in-law, who informed me that Deidre had been expressing thoughts about ending her life. She allegedly stated that if she couldn't have me, she didn't want to live. My mother-in-law pleaded with me to consider speaking with Deidre, and although I initially hesitated, I ultimately agreed to meet with her. I made the decision to meet with her in a setting that included both my mother and my mother-in-law as witnesses to the conversation. During this meeting, Deidre was open about her feelings of remorse and expressed a desire to make amends. She laid out a detailed plan of everything she was willing to do for me if I would consider giving her another chance. Throughout our discussion, she consistently pleaded with me to grant her just 6 months to demonstrate her commitment to changing the situation between us. I allowed her the space to articulate her thoughts and feelings, letting her speak freely until she had exhausted everything she wanted to share. Once she concluded her monologue, I felt it was essential to be candid about my own feelings. I made it clear that my perception of her had shifted fundamentally. I no longer viewed her as a romantic partner and had no interest in pursuing any form of reconciliation, even if only for a brief period. Following this encounter, I learned from her mother that Deidre had descended into a profound depression, becoming withdrawn and isolating herself within the confines of her home. My mother-in-law took it upon herself to help, regularly arriving at my house early in the morning, around 6:30 a.m., right before I headed to work. She would take care of the children, dressing them, preparing their breakfast, and then bringing them back to her home for the day to be with Deidre. According to my mother-in-law, Deidre's behavior had changed dramatically. She seemed emotionally distant from the children and spent the majority of her time in her bedroom, often crying and yearning for my presence. This distressing situation did not go unnoticed by our daughter, who began inquiring about why her mother was frequently in tears. This revelation deeply troubled both her and my son Timmy, even though he was still quite young and may not have fully grasped the situation. In an attempt to reassure Sammy, I explained the new living arrangements. I told her that she, Timmy, and I were living in our house, while Mommy was residing with Grammy. Once I clarified the situation, Sammy seemed to feel reassured, although her primary concern was the thought of having to move to Grammy's house as well. Though she loved both her Grammy and her mother dearly, I sensed that her attachment to me was stronger, and she was worried about leaving our home, her room, and the nearby creek where she found so much joy during playtime. I reassured her that such a move would never happen, which helped alleviate her anxiety, but the emotional upheaval surrounding Deidre did not dissipate. As the date for our final divorce hearing drew near, the intensity of Deidre's desperation became apparent. She began bombarding me with calls and texts while I was at work, enumerating all the things she was willing to do for me and insisting that I would find immense happiness if I chose to stay with her. While I am summarizing her repeated promises and reassurances, the general idea was clear: she was willing to do almost anything to restore our relationship. Then, just one day before the divorce hearing, I received a concerning phone call from my mother-in-law. She informed me that Deidre had been rushed to the hospital by ambulance after experiencing what doctors initially suspected might be a heart attack. Following her admission, a series of tests were conducted, leading to the conclusion that the issue stemmed from severe dehydration. Her mother shared with me that Deidre had not eaten anything for the past 3 days, although she had claimed to be drinking water. It turned out that in reality, she had not been consuming enough fluids, which led to her dangerous condition. I couldn't help but speculate that this might have been a deliberate attempt by Deidre to delay our divorce proceedings. Unfortunately, her strategy proved successful, as the hearing was postponed until after the new year, and then further delayed due to inclement weather. Ultimately, the hearing took place in early March, and I was granted the divorce, a decision that brought me considerable relief. Overall, I felt that I had navigated the situation relatively well. We resided in a no-fault state, and I possessed video evidence of Deidre's infidelity. Surprisingly, this evidence was not required, as Deidre and her attorney voluntarily provided a detailed written confession to the judge regarding the distribution of our assets. As a result, I ended up retaining approximately 63% of our marital property, given that the judge permitted me to keep everything I had brought into the marriage. Although I was relieved by this outcome, Deidre ultimately received $71,000 from me along with child support, while no alimony was awarded. While I still felt I had managed to secure a reasonably good deal, the notion of providing child support to her sat somewhat uneasily with me. We arranged for equal custody, with my home designated as the primary residence for our children. I was covering my half of the expenses, but in addition, I found myself paying her half as well. This raised questions in my mind regarding fairness. Shouldn't she contribute to the financial responsibilities as well? It seemed to me that the court system exhibited a bias against fathers in situations like this. At this point, our arrangement remained stable. We maintained the same custody schedule, wherein the children would stay with me from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. daily. This routine worked well for the kids, allowing them to spend quality time with both parents each day. I had even managed to re-establish a line of communication with Deidre, but I made it clear that it would be strictly focused on matters related to our children. When she inquires about my well-being, I find it necessary to gently redirect the conversation towards a different topic, specifically focusing on the children. This approach serves a dual purpose. It not only alleviates any discomfort regarding my feelings but also shifts the attention to what is truly important: our kids. Recently, a situation has arisen that requires my immediate attention. As I mentioned in one of my previous posts, my wife, Deidre, and my mother-in-law typically come over each morning and stay until I return home at 6:30 p.m. However, for the past 3 days, I have noticed a shift in this routine. During this time, only my wife has been present at our home when I arrive, while my mother-in-law has not been there. Upon my return, I have observed that my wife lingers in the living room, attempting to engage me in conversation while also interacting with our children. Yesterday was particularly poignant when little Timmy became upset at the prospect of his mother leaving. He expressed his desires candidly, wanting her to stay longer, which is a sentiment many children can relate to. My wife, perhaps seeking a connection or sympathy in that moment, noticed Timmy's distress and seemed to exploit it to elicit a reaction from me. Despite this, I remained resolute and focused on comforting Timmy. I assured him that he would see his mother the very next morning, which eventually helped him calm down. This situation has prompted me to plan a discussion with Deidre tomorrow. I aim to stress the importance of keeping our handoff conversations brief and focused. It is crucial for our family dynamics that we maintain a clear and concise exchange of information during these transitions, ensuring that the kids feel secure and supported. Now, I would like to address a question that has arisen from numerous respondents regarding a conversation I had with Sammy. During that particular exchange, Sammy mentioned that Mommy was napping with the window man. Many have been curious if I have shared this information with anyone else. The answer to that question is a firm no. I do not have any immediate plans to disclose this conversation to anyone. I made a promise to Sammy that I would keep this matter between us, and I hold that promise in high regard. It is essential to me to honor my word, and I believe that perhaps many years down the line, I may consider discussing it with her as she matures. However, for the time being, I genuinely hope that she has completely forgotten whatever she may have seen or heard. So far, Sammy has never brought up the topic again, and she continues to be active and full of joy, just as she always has been. Given this context, I see little need to revisit that conversation with her now. With that, my story reaches its conclusion. While it may not have a conventional happy ending, it represents the best possible outcome given the circumstances we face. Now, after sharing this narrative, it is time to transition to another story that holds its own excitement. Stay tuned as I present what comes next. Story 2. My situation is quite complicated. During my husband's military deployment abroad, I found myself in a precarious position. I became pregnant, but the child is not his. This revelation has shattered the foundation of my marriage, and now my husband has expressed his desire for a divorce, leaving me feeling abandoned and insecure, especially given my advanced stage of pregnancy. I am a 25-year-old woman who has been married for the past 2 years, and this unforeseen circumstance has turned my life upside down. Our story began in a seemingly serendipitous way. I met my husband at a restaurant close to a military base while I was on a family trip. My father struck up a conversation with several men in military uniforms, and the chemistry between my dad and my now husband was immediate. As the night unfolded, my father introduced him to the family, and despite the presence of my relatives, my husband and I exchanged meaningful glances. He didn't propose to me directly, rather, he discreetly slipped his number under the table, initiating our connection. Our communication quickly blossomed into something more, and after just 6 months of dating, we made the significant decision to marry. To some, this may seem like a hasty choice, but we felt an undeniable bond, as if we were meant to be together. Shortly after we tied the knot, we were fortunate enough to receive a government-provided house as a benefit of being a military couple, allowing us to start our life together in a supportive environment. A year ago, my husband was deployed, which placed us in a long-distance relationship. Before his departure, we had a heartfelt conversation about maintaining our connection, and he entrusted me with managing our finances and caring for his parents while he was away. We outlined our future plans and expressed our excitement about starting a family, particularly his strong desire to become a father. Initially, we handled the distance well, with regular video calls and messages that allowed us to feel connected. However, the emotional void of physical absence became increasingly difficult to bear. I longed for the warmth of his embrace, and the reality of only seeing him through a screen became a source of loneliness. During this period of longing, a new colleague joined my workplace. I was tasked with training him, and he quickly captured my attention with his good looks and dependability. Despite my efforts to maintain boundaries, he consistently showed interest in me, testing my resolve. At first, I was clear in expressing my commitment to my marriage, but over time, his gestures, small and seemingly innocent, began to chip away at my defenses. He would bring me snacks, invite me to dinners, and engage in light-hearted conversations that made me feel special and appreciated. One evening, after a few drinks, I found myself in a vulnerable state. When he kissed me, I instinctively kissed him back, only to be struck by a wave of guilt as I realized what I had done. I hurriedly left, consumed by feelings of remorse that stayed with me during video calls with my husband. The guilt intensified when I realized I was fantasizing about my colleague, longing for what we could have together. I attempted to keep my distance at work, but it proved futile. He approached me, apologized for overstepping, and we eventually talked. One thing led to another, and we shared another kiss. What began as an innocent connection soon evolved into a secret physical relationship. We would meet in discreet locations, initially motels and later at one another's homes. The thrill was intoxicating, but I was aware of the risks and consequences. Then, yesterday, my world changed irreversibly when I discovered I was 3 months pregnant. I had initially attributed my mood swings, heightened sense of smell, nausea, and noticeable weight gain to work-related stress and poor eating habits. However, after a visit to the doctor, the truth was laid bare: I had just completed my first trimester. The reality sank in: this child could not possibly be my husband's, as he had been away for close to a year. Now, I stand at a crossroads, grappling with fear and uncertainty. I have to face the reality of a tremendous secret that could dismantle my life as I know it. How can I navigate this uncharted territory? What steps can I take to keep this reality from coming to light, knowing that my husband will eventually discover the truth? 2 months have passed since I shared my story of infidelity and the complicated pregnancy that ensued, and still, I find myself unable to act decisively, left to ponder the future that seems increasingly grim. I am currently navigating the complexities of my life as a pregnant woman, and the situation has taken an unexpected and distressing turn. Just 2 days ago, on my birthday, my husband surprised me with an early return from his deployment. He was not scheduled to come back for another 3 months, and during that time, I had struggled with the decision to share the news of my pregnancy with him. I had not yet gathered the courage to tell him, fearing his reaction. Unfortunately, when he discovered I was pregnant, his shock quickly morphed into absolute fury. His response went beyond anger, it was marked by an overwhelming sense of disgust. His reaction was explosive and tumultuous. He began breaking things and destroying the decorations I had arranged for my birthday celebration, displaying a level of rage and disappointment that left me paralyzed. In front of my guests, he scolded me harshly, making the moment unbearable. After unleashing his anger, he stormed out, leaving me in a state of confusion and heartbreak. Since that day, I have not seen or heard from him. Despite the efforts of both his family and mine to reach out and communicate with him, he has remained unreachable. The silence has turned into a source of collective concern, as we have no information on his whereabouts or mental state. In desperation, we attempted to locate him by contacting local shelters, hospitals, and police stations, but none of these avenues have yielded any results. I find myself yearning for a chance to explain everything and to work through this crisis together. As a week passed without any contact from him, an update came through my husband's parents. They reached out to mine to reassure them that he had called them and claimed to be safe. What was particularly distressing was their unwillingness to communicate with me directly. Instead, they asked my parents to persuade me to sign the divorce papers that he had sent. I felt utterly betrayed, especially considering the sacrifices I had made for their family during his absence. I had taken on the responsibility of caring for his parents, ensuring they were well taken care of while he was away. Their approach felt deeply hurtful, as if they were turning their backs on me when I needed support the most. I couldn't help but wonder why he wouldn't come back to have a mature discussion about everything, rather than leave it to his parents to handle the situation. The notion of ending our marriage was incomprehensible to me, especially given my pregnancy. He had always expressed a strong desire to be a father, and now, faced with the reality of impending fatherhood, he seemed ready to abandon me. The prospect of divorce loomed heavily over my head. I worried about losing our home and potentially facing homelessness during such a vulnerable time in my life. The implications were overwhelming, as I grappled with the potential for upheaval in my life while carrying our child. In the weeks that followed, I experienced a significant life change. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Unfortunately, the joy of her arrival was overshadowed by the reality of my situation. The biological father, who had received a promotion at work, distanced himself quickly due to the gossip and judgment we faced from colleagues. Feeling the weight of the situation, I made the difficult decision to resign from my job. I found myself in a precarious position, navigating the challenges of unemployment and divorce. Despite everything, I had to prioritize my daughter's well-being. Therefore, I took legal action against my husband for child support and was successful in my pursuit. The court granted my request, and I also retained ownership of our home as part of the settlement agreement. Nevertheless, the sense of victory felt fleeting. The child support amount he pays is significantly lower than his earnings, and he refuses to take any interest in our daughter's life. This lack of involvement and support has been another source of profound disappointment. I am currently in discussions with my lawyer about the possibility of returning to court to seek an increase in child support, particularly since my job situation has changed, and I am struggling to provide the quality of life I want for my child. However, my lawyer has advised caution, especially considering that my ex is not the biological father of my daughter. This factor complicates matters significantly, and my lawyer is concerned that pursuing this could backfire. Recently, the situation took another troubling turn. My ex-husband filed a legal petition to disestablish his paternity through DNA testing, and the court has granted this request. They are scheduled to conduct a DNA test on my child, a development that fills me with dread. My lawyer has expressed that the outlook does not seem favorable, particularly given our circumstances in Florida, where paternity laws can be stringent. There is a very real possibility that I could lose the child support that is crucial for providing for my daughter. The weight of uncertainty hangs heavily over me as I face the impending test, and I find myself searching for clarity in an increasingly chaotic situation.